The fintech space in Nigeria has experienced remarkable growth over the past few years, with innovative solutions to address financial inclusion and enhance overall payment systems. However, alongside the industry's progress are some unwelcome challenges, especially in the form of fraud. On the program this week, I'll be talking to Samuel Ubido, chairman of Tech Innovate Group, who will be sharing insight on how best to tackle the menace. Now, Samuel, you would agree with me that Nigeria's fintech industry has experienced, tremendous growth recently. And of course, with this growth, we've also seen a rise in digital financial services, which has, somewhat changed how we access banking and payments. So tell me, what are some of the standout innovations you've seen in the space that may have contributed to this success?
Sure. Well, that's a very interesting question. We've seen the inflow of remittance coming into Nigeria, and we can see the impact which the fintech sector is bringing. And what I can say is the digital payment, that has been quite good in terms of my money and peer-to-peer lending. And also in terms of blockchain and smart contract, this is sort of new technology that have been implemented in the Nigerian and the fintech ecosystem in Africa. Lastly, what I would say is the buzzword currently in everyone's mouth is AI and machine learning. We're currently seeing AI and machine learning being used to detect fraud and to do improved credit scoring in general in the ecosystem. Those are some of the high-level innovations that I'm seeing so far.
Right, and this success, also due to this innovations that you've just mentioned, surely has had its impact on the broader Nigerian economy, especially in terms of financial inclusion, yes?
Oh, absolutely. I've literally just came back from Saudi Arabia, where I moderated a panel around financial inclusion. And what we've seen here is the new and digital services is touching and reaching a lot of the unbanked. This is like increasing the ecosystem. So what we've seen here is SME growth, because normally people are not able to access internet or banking using mobile money and the new technologies. They're able to access financing, bank accounts, and payments. And also, what we're also seeing is generally the financial inclusion theme is being funded across Africa, and Nigeria is leading the way with some of the solutions which we're implementing.
Well, Samuel, let's tilt this conversation a little bit, right? Because as the industry grows, so does the risk of fraud. So would you say the expansion of the fintech industry has made fintech companies more vulnerable to cyber fraud?
Yes, absolutely. I guess the theme around cyber fraud and fraud is normally criminals go to where the money is at. And as we can see that fintech companies are raising a lot of money and the transaction volumes are increasing. So definitely there's been a rise and increase with cyber attack, which is affecting the ecosystem within Africa and specifically in Nigeria. So I can see a lot of banks and fintech companies being vulnerable, and definitely, I guess the conversation will be around what steps can they take to stay protected. But of course, with the inflow of money, fundraising, and transaction volume, definitely cyber threats and cyber attackers are keen in seeing how they can take advantage of any vulnerable systems out there.
Seeing as we both agree that they are quite vulnerable, based on the volume of transactions they're making, do you think that these companies have kept pace with the increasing sophistication of these fraudsters?
I would say overall, the ecosystem is quite secure and quite mature cybersecurely, but definitely there are new themes and technologies which can be implemented and best practices. So things like multi-factor authentication. Some banks and some fintech companies don't yet implement MFA. Now, without implementing MFA, this is quietly highly susceptible to third-party risk and middle channels attack. And things like AI-based fraud detection, I'm sure we all sort of see news around if a fintech company get hacked or frauds being occurred. Definitely the use and implementation of AI and machine learning-based tools to detect any internal fraud or external fraud definitely are things that they need to definitely keep hold of. I'll say there's sort of two key points or things that they need to sort of keep hold of. But in general, my thoughts are, yes, the industry is going in the right direction, but definitely there needs to be a more increase in focus in cybersecurity and the importance, because with all these digital initiatives, without trust, you can't get a market share and you can't get the confidence of the customers and the clients. And when we speak about the broader financial inclusion topic, one of the main reasons is cash. People say, well, if I've got the cash at home, although it's susceptible to theft, but it's less susceptible to internet attacks and risk. But of course, with new technology, new system, if those are not secure, we could then make sort of financial inclusion a bit more vulnerable, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. And before we go back to the issue of trust that you mentioned just now, surely we cannot talk about the threats without also talking about ways to tackle them. So what strategies have proven effective, in fighting this threat?
Definitely. I would say the first thing is training and awareness. In cybersecurity, you can't first protect what you don't know. And if there isn't a cybersecure culture within the company, then people tend to be a lot relaxed and not adhere to regulations. So we look at phishing, for example. Someone can go on LinkedIn or do some reconnaissance and find who the CIO is, CFO is, or someone in the company, send an email, and then see how they can sort of manipulate this system. But what I'm sort of seeing now is best practices are, with cybersecurity, there's three elements: people, technology, and processes. The people elements are most of the time the last level of defense, because you need a human action to make an action, right? Training. Are your staff in your organization is trained? Do they understand the right standard? Do they know what a phishing email looks like? Do they know how to report it? Once we've got the people trained, now we look at technologies. So things like multi-factor authentication, things like phishing detection, also things like AI and machine learning tools that can detect fraud or anonymized behavior. And then lastly, what process do we have in the organization? Do we have a cybersecurity policy? So in the case like Nigeria, we have NDPR. Are we compliant to NDPR? Are we complying with the CBN regulation for cybersecurity? And what collaboration are we doing across industries, but globally or within the continent, to ensure that we maintain it cyber secure? So essentially what I'm trying to say is, one technology wouldn't fix all the issues. It's a combination of technology as well as the people using the technology. And what brings this together is the governance framework and the regulation that ensures that we adhering to the highest level of cybersecurity posture.
Well, Samuel, before I take you up on, regulation and early detection, let's come back to trust, but, among the fintech companies themselves, because even though there's been hesitation, especially due to concerns over data privacy and, reputational risk, one proposed solution is data sharing between fintech companies. Now, do you think this is the key? And if so, how can companies balance data sharing with privacy concerns?
Sure, this is quite a very interesting question. So I was privileged earlier in my career to be part of a working group, and the concept was very simple. It got the head of information securities or data protection of the industry. It got the regulator of the industry, and also got the competent authority for cybersecurity. Now, this was quite fantastic because in there was a safe space where we could discuss challenges which we've seen across industry, as well as speaking to the regulation in terms of how we need the regulation to be. And then, of course, some of these things need funding. Now, let's take it to a Nigerian context. What I propose is definitely sharing information is a must, especially in a closed group within industries, because what you're facing in your cybersecurity department is definitely most likely what your peer in the other organization is facing. So my sort of suggested proposition would be around, well, if the CBN central bank to maybe create a working group, because they lead all things policy for FinTech. And then following from this, you can then have the agency responsible for cybersecurity, and then the leads of the FinTechs and maybe banks come together once a month and discuss what are the cyber threats that we are seeing, number one. And number two, what can we do as a group and as an ecosystem to ensure that we have the right toolings and we have the right skill sets to do this. And if it's an element of funding, as a group, the ecosystem can then go to the central bank or can then go to a regulator to say, well, definitely critical infrastructure, if this goes down, it's going to be a huge risk to the nation and reputation. So how can we work together collectively using a single set of data to ensure that the ecosystem is secure? Because ultimately, it's although it's different companies, it is citizens' money, it is our money and it's our information. So definitely, we as a country, organization, and industries needs to ensure that together we stay secure.
Yeah, you're definitely right. Collaboration is, a recurring theme, when we talk about solutions to curb, cyber fraud. But also, there's no doubt that regulation plays a huge role in shaping how fintechs operate, especially when it comes to fraud prevention. So, do you think Nigeria's current regulatory framework is keeping up with the pace of innovation, or is there a need for more adaptive regulation?
Sure, this is quite a very interesting question. When it comes to regulation, some would argue innovation always is ahead of regulation. But what I see here is a unique opportunity whereby a working group could be created within private sector and public sector to ensure that the regulation is in line with the innovation. I think overall, Nigeria is doing a great job. The central bank, the Ministry of Information, also NITDA and the presidency are doing quite amazing when it comes to cybersecurity. But what I'll also suggest in addition to this is a collaborative effort, because what we see here is people in the industry are driving the new technology, using the sandboxes, and sometimes people say regulation normally catch up. But now we could have an ecosystem whereby it could be a joint working group with the regulator and private sector to ensure that the regulation is one, aligns, and also relevant, rather than a regulation that stops innovation, because ultimately we need to be innovating to stay competitive. In summary, yes, they are doing a great job, but of course more can be done because the pace at which cyber threats are increasing, especially due to AI, is quite at a fast pace. So definitely it needs to be a lot more adaptive with releasing regulation, communication, skill set, training and funding.
Samuel, I totally agree with you. Collaboration between the fintechs, the regulators, and of course other stakeholders, because when they work together, they can create a safer ecosystem for digital financial systems. Well, it was indeed great to have you join us, on the program to share your knowledge with us on tech trends. Samuel Ubido, chairman of Tech Innovate Group. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me. Have an amazing day. Bye for now.
That's a wrap for this week.